Hi everyone, welcome back to another video on the Mind Oracle. Today we're going to be looking at the cognitive interview. Now, the cognitive interview is one of the last topics of memory AQA psychology. It is still a very important part. It ties in all the concepts that we've learned so far together and is an example of how psychological research into memory can help with real life uses. And an example of this is interviewing suspects or eyewitnesses to a crime to gather more information that can help catch the criminal. Now, first, we're going to be focusing on the different parts of the cognitive interview and their definitions. It's very important that you learn these. So, first of all, we'll be starting off with report everything. So, this involves reporting even the smallest of details, which can help to build a more detailed picture. And then we have reverse the order, which is when we reduce the possibility of memory being affected by schemas and expectations. So essentially, the eyewitnesses or the suspects, most of the time it is eyewitnesses, they are asked to repeat everything that they have seen at the crime scene in the opposite order to make sure that the memory is accurate and to make sure that the memory isn't affected by things like what they expect to happen next. Another technique is to reinstate context, which is when you take the eyewitness back to the scene of the crime so that any cues, so if you remember in previous videos, we've covered things like free recall and cued recall and how different cues in our environment can help us to remember information. We take the eyewitness back to the scene of the crime to potentially have these cues help them remember more information and recall more facts that they might have not done so had they recorded it within a police station, for example. Another technique, or the last technique, is changing the perspective. So the eyewitness will be asked to recall everything that they saw from the perspective of someone else that was standing there, even potentially from the suspect's or the victim's perspective. So what this does is again, it ties into the theme of making sure that memory isn't affected by schemas or expectations. It makes sure that the eyewitness is recalling all the events that happened correctly, and it's not just based on what they assume or what they expect to happen based on whatever biases they might already have. Now we'll be looking at the evaluations. There was a very short AR1. There's not a lot to remember for this. It is mostly just the key definitions that you need to know. And now we'll be moving on to weaknesses and strengths of the cognitive interview. So, one really big weakness of the cognitive interview is the fact that it is time consuming. Because they use so many techniques, it does usually take longer than a standard interview. It also requires specialist training, and as a result, police may be reluctant to use it because they might feel as though a shorter interview might help them achieve more. They can get on to doing other tasks that are needed to help solve the crime, and therefore they might be less willing to use it, and therefore we can argue that the cognitive interview is not practical for everyday use, especially in urgent cases where they need to collect evidence really quickly, or if there's a chance that they might not be able to catch the suspect after a certain period of time. So that is a downside of using the cognitive interview as a method to accurately recall information following the event of a crime. However, to go against the point that we mentioned before, one of the strengths of the cognitive interview is that not all parts are equally valuable. I know that sounds like a weakness. However, researchers have found that the report everything method and the reinstate context method have better recall, or they help to produce better recall, and therefore the cognitive interview is adaptable. And if the police feel as though they do not have enough time to go through all the techniques that are usually involved in a cognitive interview, they can focus on these two specific aspects, which makes it a lot less time consuming and also just more effective than a standard interview. So they can sort of combat the issue of the cognitive interview taking up too much time without necessarily reducing the accuracy of eyewitness testimony or the effectiveness of questioning them. So that is an advantage of the cognitive interview. When you're writing this in an essay style question, make sure that you write the strength after the weakness, because the strength does sort of directly go against the weakness. So you want to make sure that your essay flows and you're not saying the strength first, because being able to say that on one hand it's time consuming, however you can adapt it so that it's less time consuming, makes a lot more sense when you're trying to write the essay all together. So make sure that you pay attention to that. Now, while these videos are a great way to improve your understanding, we've just covered the AO1 and AO3 for the cognitive interview, and you have all the theoretical information that you need. I've also created a website which has detailed revision notes and summaries to help you save time and secure those top grades. You can also find sample essays that score top marks, bonus evaluations, and also links to my tutoring platforms. So if you feel as though you could do with a little bit more help, maybe some more tips on exam technique, I have loads of links up on platforms like Fiverr and Superprof. So if you want to go and give that a look, the link is in the description below. So please go to check that out if you think that could be useful to you in scoring the top grades for your exam. If you want to explore psychological topics outside of the AQA or GCSE curriculum, do go check out my sister channel called Mystic Mind, where we cover loads of different psychological topics that aren't covered in the syllabus. So, for example, we have things like attachment styles, we even focus on things like supernatural psychology or paranormal psychology, and a lot of topics that aren't covered within the specifications. So, if you would like to explore those kind of things, do go check that out as well. The link is in the description and on the main channel page. Now, as always, we do have an exam practice question at the end of this video. So the question for today is to outline techniques used in the cognitive interview. Again, not too much to write for this. This is purely just making sure that you've remembered the information that you need to know. Even just bullet pointing the four main steps. If you don't feel like writing an essay, it's absolutely fine. But do give it a go to make sure that you've really understood and collected the information from today's video. Okay, so here we have all four steps with a slightly more detailed definition so that you can use it in the exam. So we have the report everything method, where the interviewer encourages the witness to report all details about the event, even though certain details may seem unimportant. It is really important that the witness says them anyway, because they could end up leading to clues or more information about what actually happened. We also have context reinstatement or reinstate the context, either way is fine, which is when you try to mentally recreate an image of the situation, including details of the environment, such as the weather conditions and the individual's emotional state, including their feelings at the time of the incident. A really good way and the most common way of doing this is taking the witness back to the scene of the crime so that certain environmental cues of that location can help trigger their memory. Another technique is to have them recall the information from a different perspective, so where they're asked to mentally recreate the situation from different points of view, and this essentially makes sure that their recall isn't affected by expectations or schemas or biases. It means that the information that they're recalling is accurate, even though they're saying it from a different perspective. And the last one is again reverse order, which sort of has a similar function to saying it from a different perspective, where you are trying to make sure that the accuracy of recall isn't affected by schemas or expectations, because it's not affected by what the participant expects to happen next, more so just the accuracy of memory of the events that took place. So that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you did find it helpful. Make sure that if you need to go over the AO1 and the AO3 again, keep up with the recall practice, because that is really just the best way to make sure that you memorize the information for the exam. And just a reminder to go check out my website if you want access to example essays that score top marks, if you want notes and templates to help you with revision. And I also have links to my tutoring platforms on there as well. If you feel as though you could benefit from any extra support, I'm more than happy to help students. So please go do check those links out if you wish. And if you're interested in exploring topics outside of the curriculum still relating to psychology, please go do check out our channel called The Mystic Mind. If you feel as though this video has helped, please do like and subscribe. It really does help us out. And let us know in the comments what you thought went well and what you would like to see in future videos, whether you think there's any improvements for us. We're always looking to expand our videos and improve them based on feedback, so do let us know if you think that there's anything that we should take note of. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time.